In the imposing mansion of CEO Lee Jinwoo, a cold-hearted widowed millionaire, a dark secret loomed. His two daughters, Lee Sora and Lee Hana, hadn't left home for 3 long years. No one could break the barrier that confined them. Until Kim Min-ji, a young maid with an unyielding spirit, accepted the challenge. Everyone said it was impossible, but she was about to perform a miracle. A gesture that would forever change the fate of that family and lead her to an unexpected romance in the vineyard. CEO Lee Jin-woo's mansion was not just a house. It was a labyrinth of silences where luxury mingled with melancholy. Every corridor, every imposing room seemed to hold a secret, an echo of the life that once pulsed there and was now suspended. Kim Min-ji, in her impeccable maid's uniform, felt the weight of that environment from the first moment. It wasn't the smell of mold, but the aroma of stagnant sadness that hung in the air, an invisible perfume that suffocated hope. All the staff whispered about the reclusive princesses, Lee Sora and Lee Hana, as if they were ghosts inhabiting the upper floors. 3 years. 3 years without seeing the sunlight, without feeling the breeze, without stepping on the grass. Min-ji watched the windows, always closed, always covered by heavy curtains, and felt a pang in her chest. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling, an intuition that there was something deeper to be uncovered. Her first week was one of observation. She didn't push, didn't try to force doors open. Instead, she moved with the lightness of a feather, but with the attention of a hawk. She noticed the untouched plates of food that returned from the rooms, the clean clothes that remained folded for days. She realized that communication was done through short notes, almost orders, left at the door, always anonymous, always cold. No one dared to question, no one dared to approach. Min-ji, however, was not no one. She started with small gestures. Instead of just leaving the food tray, she added a small flower picked from the garden or a fresh fruit that wasn't on the menu. Instead of simply folding the clothes, she left a small scented sachet with a soft lavender aroma. There was no response, no sign that her actions were noticed, but she persisted. She believed that kindness, however invisible, always found its way. One day, while tidying the library, Min-ji found an old photo album forgotten on a dusty shelf. The images were vibrant, full of laughter and color. A beautiful woman with a radiant smile next to a serious man, but with a sparkle in his eyes, and 2 small girls with the same delicate features she imagined belonged to Sora and Hana. They were in a vineyard, running among the grapevines, their faces stained with grape juice, joy overflowing. The sight was such a stark contrast to the reality of the mansion that Min-ji felt a pang in her heart. That was the past, the memory of lost happiness. That night, instead of silently leaving the food tray, Min-ji gently knocked on Sora's bedroom door. There was no answer. She waited. She knocked again, a little louder. A muffled sound of something falling was the only reaction. "Miss Sora?" she called, her voice soft but firm. "I've brought dinner and I found something you might want to see." She waited another minute, her heart pounding. The door remained closed. Min-ji sighed, but didn't give up. She slid the photo album under the door, along with a small note. "Life out there still awaits you, and the vineyard, it's still there." The next day, the album was no longer in the hallway. It was a small, almost imperceptible sign. But for Min-ji, it was a crack, a fissure in the fortress. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The trauma that held them captive was deep, the pain of their mother's loss, their father's coldness, the pressure of a world they had rejected. But she also knew that behind those doors, the 2 girls from the vineyard, the ones who laughed and ran freely, still existed. The tension in the mansion was palpable. The other staff looked at Min-ji with a mixture of admiration and pity. "She's going to get hurt," they whispered. "No one can get close to them." CEO Lee Jin-woo himself, a man who seemed made of stone, maintained a cold distance, observing Minji's attempts with a silence that could be interpreted as disapproval or perhaps a veiled curiosity he wouldn't allow himself to express. Minji didn't care about the whispers. She continued to leave small messages, to talk about the world outside, about the changing seasons, about the smell of rain and the warmth of the sun. She spoke about the vineyard, describing it with vivid details, as if painting a picture with words. It wasn't an imposition, but an invitation to remember, to feel, to dream. One afternoon, while Minji was watering the plants in the garden, a faint voice, almost a whisper, came from one of the upstairs windows. "The vineyard. How is it now?" Minji froze, her heart leaping. It was Lee Hana's voice, the younger of the sisters. The voice was choked, but there was a curiosity, a glimmer of hope that Minji dared not ignore. She turned to the window, though she couldn't see anyone. "It's waiting, Miss Hana. The grapes are ripe, ready to be harvested. And the air there. It's the purest there is." A silence followed, longer than before. Minji thought she had lost the connection. Then Hana's voice came again, a little stronger, but still hesitant. "And what if we wanted to see it?" Minji felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't a miracle, not yet, but it was the first step, the first crack in the fortress. And she knew, with unwavering certainty, that the vineyard, that place of memories and promises, was the key to the Lee sisters' freedom. Lee Hana's voice, a fragile whisper that barely dared to exist, echoed through the garden, hitting Minji like a precise arrow. And what if? What if we wanted to see it? It wasn't a question, but a plea, a tenuous thread of hope, detaching itself from a fortress of pain. Minji felt her heart race, but kept her voice calm, firm, like an anchor amidst the storm of emotions she knew was brewing upstairs. "Miss Hana," she replied, turning to the invisible window, "there is no what if. There is only when. The vineyard is there waiting for you, and I will be here to take you." A heavy silence followed. Minji could almost feel the internal struggle, the battle between the desire for freedom and the paralyzing fear that held them hostage. She knew that Hana's answer wasn't just hers. It was an echo, perhaps, of a thought Sora also shared, or perhaps a silent rebellion against her older sister. The dynamic between the two was a mystery Minji was still unraveling. That night, Minji didn't just leave the food tray at the door. She added a small vase with a single white rose from the garden and a handwritten note, "The rose bloomed today. Its scent is sweet and strong, just like the courage I know you possess." The next day, the rose and the note were gone. Another sign, small but significant. Minji felt she was walking on a minefield where every step needed to be calculated. The tension in the mansion didn't lessen. It merely shifted form, from a stagnant silence to an almost unbearable anticipation. The other staff looked at Minji with a new mixture of apprehension and respect. CEO Lee Jin-woo, for his part, remained a sphinx. His eyes, once merely cold, now seemed to carry a gleam of more intense observation, a silent questioning of that young maid's audacity. Minji decided there was no point in waiting. Inertia was the greatest enemy. She began to speak louder as she cleaned the corridors, describing the world outside with a richness of detail she hoped would be irresistible. She spoke of the cloudless blue sky, of the birdsong nesting in the garden trees, of the smell of wet earth after a summer rain. She spoke of the vineyard, of the green leaves dancing in the wind, of the sun ripening the grapes, of the promise of a new beginning that each harvest brought. "Miss Sora, Miss Hana," she called softly as if talking to the walls, The air out there is different. It's light. It's free. Days turned into a week of anticipation. Minji felt the energy shift. Plates returned with less untouched food. Small noises were heard in the rooms, light footsteps, a muffled whisper. They were listening. They were thinking. Then, one morning, while Minji was in the garden, a stronger, though still hesitant voice came from Sora's window. "Minji, what do we need to do?" It was Sora. Her voice was hoarse, as if unused for a long time, but there was a fragile determination in it. Minji dropped the pruning shears, her heart pounding erratically. This was the moment. "We need courage, Miss Sora, and a plan." She climbed the stairs, her heart in her throat. She stopped at Sora's bedroom door. "Miss Sora, Miss Hana, I know it's frightening, but I'll be with you every step of the way." A long silence. Then the doorknob turned. The door opened just a crack, revealing a sliver of a pale face, wide, frightened eyes. It was Hana. Her hair was long and tangled, her skin almost translucent. She looked like a forgotten porcelain doll. "Minji," she whispered, and then recoiled, as if eye contact was too much. Minji knelt to be at Hana's eye level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hello, Miss Hana. It's a pleasure to finally see you." She smiled, a genuine and warm smile. "Is Sora there?" A movement behind Hana. Sora appeared, taller, with a rigid posture, her eyes fixed on Minji with a mixture of distrust and curiosity. She looked like a statue, beautiful, but frozen in time. "What do you want?" Sora asked, her voice stronger than Hana's, but still laden with a protective coldness. "I want to take you to the vineyard," Minji replied, without preamble. "I want you to feel the sun, the wind. I want you to see that the world is still out there waiting for you." Sora looked away, but Hana took a small step forward. "But it's too far. And what if someone sees us?" The fear was palpable in her voice. "No one will see you if you don't want them to," Minji assured. "We can go very early before things get busy, and I'll drive. We'll be safe." The idea of going out, of facing the world, was overwhelming. Minji could see the panic in their eyes. 3 years of reclusion had transformed the outside world into a monster. "We can't," Sora said, almost a lament. "Not after everything. Not after Mom." The mention of their mother was a blow. Minji knew the wound was deep. She moved a little closer, slowly extending her hand, offering it to Sora. "I know the pain is great, Miss Sora, but perhaps the vineyard can bring back some of the good memories, the ones filled with laughter, not tears." Sora looked at Minji's outstretched hand, then at the maid's gentle face. Her eyes, once icy, seemed to waver. Hana, for her part, looked from Minji to Sora, hope and fear waging a silent war on her face. "Life out there still awaits you," Minji repeated, the words from the note she had left with the album. "And the vineyard. It's still there, exactly as in the photos. Perhaps even more beautiful." Sora hesitated for a long moment, Minji's hand still extended in the air. The tension was almost unbearable. Minji dared not breathe. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 3 years of sadness, Sora gave a small nod. It was almost imperceptible, but it was a yes, the first step out of their self-imposed prison. The miracle was beginning. Sora's almost imperceptible nod was a silent earthquake that reverberated throughout the mansion. Minji felt the air vibrate with the promise of a new beginning, but also with the overwhelming weight of 3 years of reclusion. It wasn't an euphoric yes, but an exhausted yes, an acknowledgement that the prison they lived in was becoming unbearable. "Thank you, Miss Sora," Minji said, her voice soft but laden with unshakable determination. She withdrew her outstretched hand, respecting their space but maintaining visual connection. "Don't worry about the details. I'll take care of everything. We just need a plan." Hana, who had been watching her older sister with wide eyes, took another small step out of the room. The corridor's light, faint and filtered, further revealed the paleness of her skin and the fragility of her figure. Sora, for her part, recoiled slightly, as if the newly made commitment was already suffocating her. "When?" Sora asked, her voice almost a whisper. Her eyes fixed on a point beyond Minji, as if visualizing the outside world she so feared. "Tomorrow morning early," Minji replied promptly. "Before dawn. That way we'll have the vineyard all to ourselves, and the soft morning light will be gentler on your eyes." She knew the transition would be painful, physically and emotionally. The sunlight, the city noise, the vastness of the world, everything would be a shock for those who lived in the shadows. "But what about clothes?" Hana asked, her voice still fragile. "We don't have anything." The shame was evident in her tone. Minji understood. 3 years without leaving home meant 3 years without buying clothes, without caring about appearance. "Don't worry about that," Minji assured, a gentle smile on her lips. "I have some comfortable and simple clothes that might fit. The important thing is that you feel at ease." She knew that simplicity would be key. Nothing that would draw attention, nothing that would make them feel exposed. Night fell over the mansion, but the usual silence was charged with a new energy, a palpable anticipation. Minji prepared 2 changes of simple, comfortable clothes, soft sweatpants, loose cotton t-shirts, and light jackets for the morning chill. She left them in a basket at the door of each room, along with a small bottle of water and a cereal bar. "For the trip," the note read. She didn't sleep much that night. Nervousness and excitement mingled in her chest. She knew this was the riskiest step she had taken so far. If something went wrong, if their trauma was reactivated, the door could close forever. Minji's alarm rang at 4 in the morning. The mansion was immersed in almost absolute darkness, punctuated only by the moonlight peeking through the windows. She dressed quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. As she passed CEO Li Jinwu's room, she slowed her pace. The door was closed, as always. Was he sleeping, or was he aware of his maid's audacity? Minji preferred not to think about it. When she reached the sisters' bedroom doors, the basket of clothes was no longer there. A small relief, a sign that they had accepted the offer. Minji gently knocked on Sora's door. "Miss Sora, Miss Hana," she whispered. "It's time." A heavy silence followed, which seemed to last an eternity. Minji could feel the hesitation, the fear, the internal battle unfolding behind that door. She waited, patient, without pressing. Then the doorknob turned again, this time with more firmness. The door opened slowly, revealing Sora and Hana. They were dressed in the clothes Minji had left, which hung a little loose on their thin bodies. Their hair was still a bit tangled, their faces pale. But their eyes were wide, reflecting a mixture of terror and an almost childlike curiosity. Hana was clinging to Sora's hand, who seemed like a fragile fortress. Sora, for her part, kept her head down, avoiding Minji's gaze, but her posture revealed extreme tension. They looked like 2 nocturnal creatures emerging from a long sleep, startled by the mere idea of light. "We're ready," Sora whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Minji smiled, a reassuring smile. "Great, let's take it slow. No one will see you." She extended her hand to Hana, who hesitated for a moment before accepting it. Hana's skin was cold to the touch. With Minji in front, holding Hana's hand, and Sora close behind, the 3 began to descend the stairs. Each step was a challenge, each shadow a monster. The sisters' steps were slow, hesitant, as if they were treading on glass. Minji spoke in a low voice, describing each step, each turn, like a guide in a dark cave. "We're almost there. The car is waiting on the side of the house, out of main sight. The service door, rarely used, was opened with a soft creak. The cold dawn air enveloped them, bringing with it the smell of damp earth and the distant aroma of garden flowers. Hannah let out a small sigh, and Sora flinched slightly. The outside world, even in the quiet of dawn, was overwhelming. Minji guided them to the car, a discreet SUV she had prepared. She opened the back seat door. "Get in. You can lie down if you want or just look out the window." Hannah got in first, curling up in the corner, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside. Sora followed her, her expression a mask of apprehension. Minji closed the door gently and hurried to the driver's seat. She started the engine, which purred softly. "Here we go," she murmured, more to herself than to them. The car glided silently through the mansion's driveway. The sisters were motionless in the back seat. Their bodies tense, Minji could see them in the rearview mirror. Hannah, with her face pressed against the window, her eyes wide, absorbing every detail of the world she had forgotten. Sora, with her head down, arms crossed, as if protecting herself from an invisible threat. The city was still asleep. The streets were empty, traffic lights blinking yellow. The dawn light began to paint the sky in shades of purple and pink, revealing the silhouettes of buildings and trees. Minji drove carefully, maintaining a constant speed, the radio off. The silence in the car was filled only by the soft hum of the engine, and the sisters held breath. Hannah pointed at something out the window, a quick movement, a glimpse of a stray cat. Sora, for her part, didn't move, but Minji noticed an almost imperceptible tremor in her shoulders. The fear was still there, but Hannah's curiosity was a sliver of light. As they drove away from the city, the landscape began to change. Buildings gave way to open fields, to denser trees. The air grew fresher, cleaner. The smell of earth and vegetation filled the car through the slightly open windows. "We're almost there," Minji announced, her voice soft. "The vineyard is just over that hill." Hannah straightened up, her eyes shining with a new intensity. Sora finally lifted her head and looked out the window. The rising sun painted the sky with vibrant colors, and the morning mist hung over the fields, creating an ethereal scene. When the car turned the last bend, the vineyard revealed itself. Rows upon rows of grapevines, green and luxuriant, stretching as far as the eye could see. The leaves danced gently in the morning breeze, and the clusters of grapes, ripe and purple, hung heavily from the branches. The golden light of the rising sun kissed each leaf, each cluster making it gleam. Minji stopped the car on a small dirt road that led to the heart of the vineyard. She looked back. Hannah's mouth was slightly open, her eyes full of tears that didn't yet dare to fall. Sora was motionless, but her eyes, once icy, now reflected a complex emotion, surprise, pain, and perhaps, just perhaps, a glimmer of hope. It was exactly like in the photos, but infinitely more real, more alive. The air was fragrant with the sweet scent of grapes and damp earth. The birdsong filled the silence. "We're here, Mrs." Minji said, her voice choked with emotion. "The vineyard. It's still here." The sisters didn't respond. They just looked, absorbing the sight, the smell, the sound. The world they had abandoned, the place of their happiest memories, was there, waiting for them. Minji knew the journey was far from over. The fortress had been cracked, but healing would take time. But at that moment, under the rising sun of the vineyard, she felt a pang of triumph. The impossible had been achieved. The first step had been taken. The soft purr of the car engine seemed like a heartbeat in the morning silence. Minji watched the sisters in the rearview mirror, their faces illuminated by the golden light bathing the vineyard. Hannah, with her mouth slightly agape, looked like a child before a fireworks display, her tear-filled eyes reflecting the green vastness. Sora, on the other hand, was a statue of restraint, though her eyes, once vacant, now danced with a complex mixture of awe and an almost palpable pain. It was the place of their happiest memories, but also the epicenter of their loss. Minji turned off the engine. The silence that followed was no longer the oppressive silence of the mansion, but a living silence, filled with birdsong, the hum of bees and the whisper of the wind through the grapevines. The air, sweet and earthy, invaded the car through the open windows, a scent the sisters hadn't smelled in a long time. "Mrs." Minji said, her voice almost a whisper, so as not to break the spell, "We're here." She opened her own door and stepped out, feeling the damp grass beneath her feet. The morning freshness was invigorating. She walked around the car and opened the back door, not with the intention of rushing them, but to offer them an exit. Hannah lifted her head, her eyes fixed on the grapevines. A solitary tear trickled down her pale cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was of pure wonder, of deep recognition. She extended a trembling hand out of the open door, as if wanting to touch the air, the promise. Sora, however, recoiled slightly, her shoulders hunching. The world outside, however beautiful, was still a threat. The sunlight, though soft, seemed to pierce her soul, revealing the wounds she had tried to hide for so long. We can't stay here," she whispered, her voice choked. Panic began to set in, a cold mist threatening to swallow the small glimmer of hope. Minji knelt in front of them, maintaining a respectful distance. "Miss Sora, Miss Hana," she said, her voice calm and firm. "There's no one here but us. The vineyard is yours. Remember, your father built it for you, so you would have a place of peace." She pointed to a nearby grapevine, laden with purple grapes. "The grapes are ripe. I remember when you were little, you used to run around here, picking the sweetest grapes." The mention of the grapes and childhood memories seemed to strike Hana. She looked at the grapevine, and a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. Her eyes moved to Sora, seeking permission, encouragement. Sora felt her sister's gaze. Hana's fragility, the hope in her eyes, was both a burden and a strength. She wanted to protect her from the world, but also wanted her to live. The internal battle was visible on her face, a storm of emotions churning beneath her facade of apathy. She closed her eyes for a moment, deeply inhaling the fragrant air. It was the scent of childhood, of lost happiness. It was his scent. Just for a moment, Sora finally murmured, her voice still trembling, but with a resignation Minji recognized as a victory. "We can't go too far." Minji smiled, a genuine and warm smile. "Of course, Miss Sora, just a few steps, just to feel the grass beneath your feet." She extended her hand again to Hana, who this time accepted it without hesitation. Hana's skin was still cold, but there was a new energy pulsing within her. With Minji guiding, Hana put one foot out of the car, then the other. Her soft shoes sank slightly into the damp grass. She took a deep breath, her eyes closed, absorbing the sensation. It was as if every cell in her body was awakening after a long sleep. Sora hesitated for another moment, but the sight of Hana, standing, breathing the open air, was a powerful magnet. She forced herself out of the car, her movements stiff and awkward. As she touched the ground, she flinched as if expecting pain, a shock. But there was only the softness of the grass, the coolness of the earth. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of danger. The vineyard was vast, and the solitude of that place, in the early morning, was both comforting and terrifying. "The sun is rising," Minji said, pointing to the east, where the sky exploded in shades of orange and gold. "It's the most beautiful sunrise I've ever seen." Hana followed Minji's gaze, her eyes widening even further. The spectacle of colors in the sky, reflected in the dewdrops on the grapevine leaves, was breathtaking. She let go of Minji's hand and took a small, hesitant step towards the grapevines, as if mesmerized. Sora watched her sister, a mixture of fear and fascination in her own gaze. She wanted to pull Hana back, to protect her. But there was something in Hana's curiosity that held her back. It was as if Hana was living for both of them. Minji stepped back, giving them space. She knew this was a delicate moment, a ballet between trauma and rediscovery. "There's a small path here," she said softly, pointing to a narrow trail between the rows of grapevines. "We can walk a bit if you like, just to feel the dew." Hana looked at the path, her eyes shining. She turned to Sora, a silent plea on her face. Sora, still tense, finally nodded, an almost imperceptible movement. "But slowly," she whispered. Minji smiled, her heart pounding with hope. The impossible was unfolding before her eyes. She had managed to bring them this far. Now she needed to guide them into the world, one step at a time. With Hana ahead, her steps still uncertain, but full of new determination, and Sora close behind, her eyes fixed on her sister's back, the three began to enter the vineyard. Every leaf, every cluster of grapes, every ray of sunlight was a reminder of a world that awaited them, and that they were, finally, beginning to embrace again. The path ahead was long, but the journey had begun. The dew kissed the grass, a soft, damp carpet beneath Hana's feet. Each step was a rediscovery, a sensation her senses had forgotten. She breathed deeply, the fresh morning air filling her lungs with a sweet scent of wet earth and ripe grapes. Her eyes, once dull, now shone with a new light, reflecting the vibrant green of the grapevines and the golden hue of the rising sun. It was as if the world was unfolding before her for the first time. Sora, on the other hand, walked as if treading on broken glass. Her movements were stiff, her shoulders tense, and her eyes scanned the horizon with an almost feverish vigilance. For her, every shadow was a threat, every whisper of the wind a warning. The vineyard, once her refuge, now seemed a labyrinth of painful memories. Each grapevine a reminder of lost happiness, of the life that had been torn from them. She felt the cold dew through the thin soles of her shoes, a sensation that should have been refreshing, but which for her was just another invasion, a discomfort. Minji watched them closely, maintaining a respectful distance but attentive to every nuance. She knew this was sacred and dangerous ground. With every step the sisters took, Minji felt the weight of responsibility, but also a growing wave of hope. They were out. They were here. Hana suddenly stopped, her eyes fixed on a cluster of purple grapes hanging from a grapevine. The grapes were covered in a thin layer of dew, sparkling like jewels under the sun. She extended a trembling hand, her pale fingers brushing the soft skin of a grape. A small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. It was a smile Minji hadn't seen in years, a glimpse of the joyful child Hana once was. "They're beautiful," Hana whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse but full of childlike admiration. "Exactly as I remembered." Sora stopped beside her sister, her gaze fixed on the same cluster of grapes. A pang of pain shot through her chest. She remembered their father, how he taught them to choose the sweetest grapes, how his large, strong hands helped them reach the highest clusters. His image, smiling, his face tanned by the sun, was vivid and painful. She closed her eyes for an instant, trying to push away the memory, but it was useless. The vineyard was a portal to the past, and she had no way to close it. "Mrs.," Minji said softly, pointing to a small dirt path that wound between the rows of grapevines. "There's a small stone bench right there, near that oak tree. I remember you used to sit there with your father, watching the sunset." The mention of the bench and the oak tree seemed to awaken something in Hana. Her eyes widened, and she looked at Minji, then at the path. The oak was a landmark, a beacon amidst the fog of her memories. She began to walk in that direction, her steps a little firmer, driven by an undeniable curiosity. Sora, however, shuddered. The stone bench, the oak tree, they were places that held memories too precious to be revisited. She felt panic begin to rise, a knot tightening in her throat. "No," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "We can't go there." Minji stepped forward, her voice calm and comforting. "You don't have to go, Miss Sora, only if you feel comfortable. But perhaps, just perhaps, the fresh air and the beauty of the place can bring some peace." As Minji spoke, a bird, startled by their presence, suddenly took flight from a nearby grapevine, flapping its wings forcefully. The sharp, unexpected sound made Sora let out a muffled cry. She recoiled quickly, tripping over her own feet and almost falling. Her eyes were wide with terror, her body trembling uncontrollably. That small sound had been the trigger, proof that the world outside was still dangerous, unpredictable. Hana turned, her eyes full of concern at her sister's panic. She reached out, but Sora was beyond reach, trapped in her own prison of fear. "Miss Sora, it's okay," Minji said, kneeling slowly, keeping her eyes on hers. "It's just a bird. They live here. There's no danger. You're safe." Sora shook her head frantically, tears beginning to stream down her pale face. "No, I'm not safe. I want to go back. Please, Minji, take me back home." Her voice was a lament, a desperate plea to return to the oppressive safety of her room. Minji felt a pang in her heart. She knew this moment would come. Progress was fragile, and fear was a powerful enemy, but she couldn't give up. Not now, not after they had come so far. She looked at Hana, who watched her sister with deep sadness, but also with silent determination. "Miss Sora," Minji said, her voice firm but full of compassion, "look at Hana. She's here. She's okay. And so are you. Just breathe. Feel the sun on your face, the smell of the grapes. There's no one here to hurt you. Just the three of us, and the memories this place holds." Hana, as if understanding Minji's appeal, took a hesitant step toward Sora. She extended her hand again, this time with more confidence. "Sora," she whispered, her voice soft as dew, "the sun is so warm, and the grapes, they're so sweet. Remember, Dad taught us to make juice here." The mention of grape juice, such a simple and happy memory, seemed to pierce Sora's fog of panic. She looked at Hana's outstretched hand, then at her sister's face, which now held an expression of plea and love. Hana's fragility, the hope in her eyes, was a mirror of Sora's own struggle. She couldn't fail Hana. With a trembling sigh, Sora extended her own hand, cold and hesitant, and touched Hana's fingers. The contact was a shock, but not of pain. It was a shock of life, of connection. Hana squeezed her hand gently, a small, encouraging smile on her lips. Minji watched the scene, her heart pounding in her chest. The bond between the sisters was the key. It was the force that would pull them out of the darkness. Fear was still there, hanging like a mist, but the connection, the love, was a stronger light. They were still in the vineyard, and that in itself was a miracle. The journey to healing was far from over, but the first major obstacle had been overcome. They were together, hand in hand, under the rising sun of the vineyard, ready to face whatever came next, one step at a time. Sora's cold, trembling hand found Hana's, an electric shock that ran through both sisters. It wasn't the pain of the past, but the spark of a long, dormant connection. Hana gently squeezed Sora's fingers, a small, encouraging smile on her pale lips. Fear still lingered in Sora's eyes, a dense fog obscuring the beauty around them, but Hana's touch was a thread of light, an anchor preventing her from being dragged back into the abyss. Minji watched, her heart pounding in her chest. That moment, so simple and so profound, was proof that the impossible was indeed unfolding. The sisters, united by touch, began to move again, their steps hesitant but now synchronized. Hana pulled Sora with a silent gentleness, while Sora allowed herself to be guided, her eyes still scanning the horizon, but with less frenzy. Every leaf, every passing cluster of grapes seemed to whisper stories of a forgotten time, a time when joy was as abundant as the grapes on the vines. The dew, which was once an invasive sensation for Sora, now felt like a cool balm, a reminder that the world outside, despite its dangers, also offered pure and simple sensations. They walked towards the oak, the majestic tree that stood like a silent guardian in the heart of the vineyard. With each step, the silhouette of the stone bench beneath its branches became clearer, and with it, the memory. For Hannah, the image of her father, sitting on that bench, his face smiling and hands stained with earth, was almost palpable. She could feel the warmth of the afternoon sun on her skin, the scent of the wine he loved so much. It was a bittersweet memory, tinged with longing, but also with a deep love that time hadn't been able to erase. She wanted to touch that bench, to sit on it, as if she could somehow reconnect with the past, with the happiness that had been stolen. Sora, however, felt the panic return with full force. The oak, the bench. They were symbols of a life that no longer existed. Every twisted branch, every moss on the stone was a vivid reminder of her father's laughter, of family picnics, of secrets whispered under the tree's protective shade. The pain was so intense it felt like a physical blow. She squeezed Hannah's hand harder, almost hurting her, and stopped abruptly, her feet rooted to the ground. "No," she murmured, her voice choked, her eyes brimming with tears. "We can't go there, Hannah. Please, no." Hannah turned, concern etched on her face. She could feel her sister's anguish, the pain that consumed her. But there was also a part of her that longed to face that pain, to transform it into something more, into a bridge to healing. She looked at the oak, then at Sora, and back at the tree, as if fighting an internal battle. Minji approached slowly, her voice soft but firm. "Miss Sora, I understand it's difficult. This place holds many memories, but perhaps, just perhaps, facing those memories, here, together, can be the first step to freeing yourselves." Sora shook her head frantically, tears streaming freely now. "Freeing. They suffocate me. I don't want to remember. I can't take it anymore." She pulled Hannah's hand, trying to get away, but Hannah resisted, holding her with surprising strength. "Sora," Hannah whispered, her voice a thread, but laden with an emotion Minji had never heard before. "Remember what Dad used to say, that the oak was like our family, strong, rooted, and that it withstood all storms. He taught us to plant a small grapevine seedling beside it, so it would grow strong like us." The mention of the grapevine seedling, such an intimate and forgotten detail, struck Sora like lightning. She stopped struggling, her eyes fixed on Hannah's face. That small gesture, planted so many years ago, was a symbol of hope, of continuity. It was something she had buried so deeply she barely remembered it. Minji, noticing the change in Sora's expression, pointed to the base of the oak. "I remember that seedling, Miss Hannah. It grew a lot. It's a strong grapevine now, bearing the sweetest clusters in the vineyard. Your father was very proud of it." Sora followed Minji's gaze, her eyes clouded with tears, but now with a glimmer of curiosity. She looked at the base of the oak, where a robust grapevine entwined itself around the trunk, its branches laden with purple grapes. It was their grapevine, the grapevine their father had planted with them, a symbol of his love and his hopes for the future. The pain was still there, a tight knot in her chest, but the image of the grapevine, so alive and full of fruit, was a powerful counterpoint. It was proof that, even after the storm, life continued, strong and resilient. She let go of Hannah's hand, but not to flee. Instead, she took a hesitant step towards the grapevine, her pale fingers brushing the green leaves. Hannah followed her, her eyes fixed on her sister. She knew this was a critical moment. Sora was on the edge of a precipice, but perhaps, just perhaps, the grapevine could be the bridge. Sora slowly knelt, her hands touching the damp earth at the base of the grapevine. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and when she opened them again, a single tear trickled down her face. But this time, it wasn't just of pain. It was a tear of recognition, of a rediscovered connection. "Dad," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but laden with raw emotion. He always said this grapevine would remind us that life always finds a way." Minji felt a shiver. That was the first time Sora had uttered her father's name in 3 years. It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken, a crack in the wall she had built around herself. Progress was slow, painful, but undeniable. They were there, in the heart of the vineyard, facing their memories, and they weren't fleeing. The journey was far from over, but the sun continued to rise, bathing the vineyard in a golden light, and with it a new hope. Sora's voice, an almost inaudible whisper, echoed through the vineyard, laden with the weight of 3 years of silence and pain. "Dad?" she repeated, this time with a little more strength, as if testing the sound of the word, feeling it on her tongue. Her pale fingers, which once trembled, now brushed the grapevine leaves with an almost reverent delicacy. It was their grapevine, the one their father had planted with such care, a symbol of hope she had forgotten, or perhaps suppressed. The damp earth beneath her hands was cold, but not hostile, and the smell of dew mixed with the sweet aroma of grapes was a symphony for her long-dormant senses. Hannah knelt beside her sister, her eyes fixed on Sora, a mixture of relief and deep sadness in her gaze. She reached out and touched Sora's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. There was no need for words. The simple act of Sora uttering their father's name, of connecting with that memory, was an emotional earthquake that shook the foundations of their isolation. Minji watched from a distance, her heart beating at an accelerated pace. She knew she was witnessing a miracle, a thread of light piercing the darkness that had enveloped the sisters for so long. Sora closed her eyes again, and a solitary tear, this time not of panic but of a deeper, more resigned pain, trickled down her face. She allowed herself to feel the ground beneath her knees, the soft touch of the leaves, the warmth of the sun beginning to heat the air, and above all, to feel her father's presence, not as a frightening shadow, but as a living, tender memory. She opened her eyes and looked at the clusters of purple grapes hanging from the grapevine, so full and vibrant. It was as if each grape contained a drop of her past, an essence of the joy that once filled that place. With a hesitant movement, Sora reached out and touched a cluster of grapes. The skin was smooth and cool, and the scent was intoxicating. She remembered the days they ran through the vineyard, competing to see who could find the sweetest cluster, their father laughing and pretending they always won. A faint laugh, almost a sob, escaped her lips. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of recognition, of a bittersweet memory that finally found its way to the surface. Hannah, encouraged by her sister's reaction, picked a cluster of grapes and offered it to Sora. "Remember, Sora, Dad taught us to taste the grapes straight from the vine. He said it was the best way to feel the sun in every drop." Sora looked at the cluster in Hannah's hand, then at her sister's face, which now held a fragile but genuine smile. She took a grape and brought it to her lips, hesitating for a moment before biting into it. The flavor exploded in her mouth, sweet, juicy, with a touch of acidity that was both familiar and strange. It was the taste of childhood, the taste of life. Minji felt a lump in her throat. Those grapes, that simple gesture, were more than food. They were a link to the past, a bridge to the present. She knew the path ahead would be long and full of obstacles, but seeing Sora taste the grape, seeing the light in her eyes, was proof that hope was not just an empty word. The The sisters remained kneeling for a while in a shared silence, each absorbing the sensations and memories the grapevine offered them. The sun rose higher, bathing the vineyard in a golden light, and the air filled with the soft hum of insects. The world outside, which once seemed a threat, now revealed itself in its simple, raw beauty. Sora stood up, her movement still a bit stiff, but with a new determination in her eyes. She looked at the oak, the majestic tree that stood a few meters away, and at the stone bench beneath its branches. The panic hadn't completely disappeared, but now it was accompanied by a curiosity, a desire to face what was there. "The oak," she whispered, her voice a little stronger now. "Dad used to tell us stories under it." Hana nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, and he taught us to draw there, with charcoal. He said we were the most talented artists in the world." Minji stepped forward, her voice soft but encouraging. "He was right. You ladies were always very talented, and that bench—" It was his favorite spot to watch the sunset. Sora took a hesitant step towards the oak, and Hana followed her, their hands meeting again, a firm and comforting squeeze. Every step was a battle, every meter covered was a victory. The oak, which once seemed a monster of painful memories, now revealed itself as a silent guardian, a repository of stories waiting to be rediscovered. As they approached, the rough texture of the trunk, the green moss covering the bench stones, everything seemed to call out to them. Sora touched the tree trunk, feeling the roughness of the bark under her fingers. She could almost hear her father's laughter, the echo of their childish voices filling the air. The pain was overwhelming, but this time it didn't suffocate her. Instead, the pain mingled with longing, with love, creating a complex tapestry of emotions she had refused to feel for so long. Hana sat on the stone bench, and Sora, after a moment of hesitation, sat beside her. For the first time in years, they were sitting together in the same spot they shared with their father, under the protective shade of the oak. The silence that followed was not of fear, but of contemplation, of a deep and shared sadness that was beginning to transform into acceptance. Minji watched the scene, the sun shining on the sisters, their faces pale, but now bathed in a light of hope. The journey was far from over, but the first major step had been taken. They were no longer fleeing. They were there, facing their memories, and for the first time in a long time, they were together, ready to face whatever came next, one step at a time, under the watchful eye of the vineyard that guarded their secrets and their hopes. The silence lingering beneath the ancestral oak was not an emptiness, but a dense tapestry, woven with threads of memories, pain, and fragile hope. Sora and Hana sat side by side on the stone bench, the cold roughness of the surface contrasting with the warmth of Hana's hand, still holding Sora's. Every beat of Sora's heart seemed to echo their father's name, a bittersweet melody she now allowed to resonate in her soul. Her eyes traced the rough trunk of the oak, the fissures and protrusions she knew so well. There, right there, was a small mark their father had made with his pocket knife, an H and an S intertwined, a symbol of his love for his daughters. She had forgotten, or rather, she had forced herself to forget, to erase every trace of a happiness that now seemed a cruelty. But now, the mark was there, as clear as the day it was made, and with it the torrent of memories. She could hear her father's deep voice, telling stories of knights and princesses, of dragons and enchanted forests, as the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, painting dancing patterns on the ground. She could smell the damp earth and dry leaves, the rustle of the wind in the treetops, and the comforting warmth of his arm around her shoulders. The pain was an overwhelming wave, but this time it didn't drown her. Instead, the pain carried her, allowing her to float on the waters of a past she had sealed. Hana, feeling the subtle tremor in her sister's hand, squeezed it harder. She knew what Sora was seeing, what she was feeling. The same images, the same sounds, the same sensations flooded her own mind. "Dad used to say this oak was our guardian," Hannah whispered, her voice choked. "It would protect us from all harm, and its roots would keep us connected, no matter how far we went." Sora turned her face to Hannah, her tear-filled eyes meeting her sister's. It was the first time in years they had shared such an intimate, painful memory, without one fleeing or the other shutting down. The wall between them, built brick by grief and fear, began to crumble, revealing the open wound they both carried. Minji watched from afar, her heart heavy. Every word, every glance exchanged between the sisters was a step on a minefield. One false step, and everything could crumble again. But the way Sora looked at Hannah, the way she didn't recoil, was a sign. A sign that the connection, though wounded, was still there, waiting to be healed. She approached slowly, without making a sound, as if fearing to break the fragile spell that enveloped them. "I remember when you were little," Minji said softly, her voice a calming balm. "Your father used to bring you here every day. He said nature was the best teacher, and that the oak had more stories to tell than any book." She pointed to a spot on the ground near the tree's exposed roots. "He even buried a time capsule here one day, with drawings and notes you made." Sora's eyes widened slightly. A time capsule. The long-buried memory resurfaced with stunning clarity. She remembered. A small metal pot filled with their childish scribbles, one of Hannah's baby teeth, and a note from their father, sealed with wax. They had promised to unearth it when they were older. But older never arrived in the way they expected. Hannah let go of Sora's hand and leaned forward, her pale fingers brushing the earth. I remember," she murmured. "He said it would be a treasure, a reminder of who we were and who we wanted to be." The idea of unearthing it was frightening. It was like opening a wound that was barely beginning to heal, but at the same time there was an irresistible pull. A part of Sora desperately wanted to touch that past, not to drown in it, but to understand how it had shaped the present. "Is it still here?" Sora asked, her voice a thread, but laden with a curiosity Minji hadn't heard in years. Minji smiled gently. "Your father was a man of his word. He said he'd bury it deep enough so no one would find it but you." She knelt, picking up a small, fallen branch. "But he showed me the exact spot. He said that if anything happened to him, I should make sure you found it." The revelation hit Sora with the force of a punch. Their father had thought of everything. Even in his absence, he had left a path, a guide. He had entrusted Minji with the task of guiding them back. A wave of gratitude and sorrow washed over her. Hannah was already starting to dig with her hands, the damp earth dirtying her fingernails. Sora, after a moment of hesitation, joined her. Her fingers, once so pale and delicate, now burrowed into the earth, searching for the hidden treasure. With each handful of earth removed, each stone pushed aside, they weren't just unearthing an object. They were unearthing parts of themselves that had been lost. The sun continued to rise, and the vineyard seemed to hold its breath, watching the two sisters in their silent search. Sweat trickled down Sora's forehead, mixing with the dust of the earth. But she didn't care. There was an urgency, a need to find it, to prove that their father was still there somehow, looking after them. Lie. Hannah's fingers touched something hard and cold. "I found it!" she exclaimed, her voice full of raw emotion. Carefully, she unearthed a small metal pot, corroded by time, but still intact. The lid was sealed with old wax, and the smell of earth and rusted metal hung in the air. Sora took the pot from Hannah's hands, her eyes fixed on the object. It was more than a pot. It was a time capsule, a portal to the past. a testament to their father's love. The tension that had accompanied her for so long, the feeling of being trapped in limbo, began to recede, replaced by a new and strange sense of clarity. They had found the treasure. But what would it reveal? And would they be ready for what was to come? The journey was only just beginning to unfold its deepest secrets. The metal pot, corroded by time and earth, rested in Sora's hands. It was heavy, not just from its material and contents, but from the overwhelming weight of the memories it promised to unearth. The old wax, sealing the lid, seemed like a seal of an untouchable past, a secret guarded for years beneath the earth and beneath the veil of grief. The smell of rusted metal and damp earth was a bittersweet aroma, an invitation and a warning. Hannah leaned in, her eyes fixed on the object, her breath caught in her throat. Curiosity mingled with fear, a fear that what was inside might be more than they could bear. Minji approached, offering a handkerchief to wipe the dirt from the pot. "He wanted you to find it when you were ready," she whispered, her voice soft as a breeze. "Perhaps the time is now." Sora tried to twist the lid, but it was stuck. Time had welded the metal, making opening it a difficult task. Hannah, with a sudden impulse, picked up a small pointed stone and began to carefully scrape away the hardened wax. Her fingers worked with a delicacy that contrasted with the urgency in her eyes. Sora watched, fascinated by her sister's determination. It was the first time in a long time that they had worked together on something, a shared goal that wasn't about fleeing, but confronting. With a small click, the wax gave way. Sora, with a final effort, twisted the lid. The air trapped inside the pot escaped with a soft hiss and a smell of old paper, and something more, something sweet and familiar, filled the space. Inside, carefully wrapped in a faded silk cloth, were the treasures of a forgotten time. Hannah took the cloth with trembling hands and unfolded it. The first thing that appeared was a small drawing, crumpled and faded, but unmistakable. It was a child's drawing of an oak tree, with two small figures holding hands beneath it and a larger smiling figure. Above, in large crooked letters, was written, "My family." Sora recognized Hannah's handwriting from when she was perhaps 5 or 6 years old. A tear trickled down Sora's face, warm and unexpected. Next, there was a small wooden bird, carved with surprising detail. Sora remembered. Her father had spent weeks carving it for her, promising that the bird would protect her from all harm. She had completely forgotten. Her fingers traced the smooth wood, feeling the texture she had loved so much in childhood. Hannah, for her part, found a small dried flower, pressed between 2 sheets of paper. "My first rose," she whispered, her voice choked. "Dad dried it for me." But what most caught Sora's attention was a yellowed envelope, carefully folded and sealed with the same type of wax that covered the pot. Her and Hannah's names were written on the front, in their father's elegant and familiar handwriting. It was a letter. Sora took the envelope, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence beneath the oak was almost deafening, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the sound of her own breathing. She opened the envelope carefully, as if fearing to tear the words it contained. The paper was thin and fragile, and the words seemed to dance before her tear-filled eyes. "My dear Sora and Hannah," she began to read aloud, her voice a thread, but laden with an emotion that had long